What's up guys, welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. I'm your host, Zach, and today I have a question. What is something you find very satisfying? Personally, I find beating a hard video game, winning an online match, getting all green lights when you're going somewhere, or most of all, revenge, which is why today's subreddit is r/ProRevenge. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. This story's called Guy Tried to Screw Me Over with Apartment Damage Fees. Backfired on him. I'm a college student and I desperately needed to find a sublease for this past spring and summer. So I ended up finding one at a pretty nice apartment complex in my city. The guy, we will call him Bob, seemed cool. We had a mutual friend. Everything went great. However, Bob wants to do the sublease under the table, without the office getting involved. Okay, no worries, I've done this before. It's a 4-and-4 with 3 other male roommates. This is important for later. I have a 2-year hound mix. She's a great dog, but she gets terrible anxiety during thunderstorms. One day, I'm at work and we have probably the biggest thunderstorm we've had this year. She flips out and tears up the edges of the carpet to my room. My dad has a guy who came and did an estimate of the damages. Told me it would cost between $200 to $400 to recarpet the room. Cool, no problem. I can afford that. Bob sees the damages and I tell him I'll cover all the damages caused by her. Anyways, I move out in July. A month passes. I'm on vacation with my family and this mother trucker Bob decides to call my dad and mom repeatedly. Then his mom calls them. I have no idea how they even got my parents' numbers. They tell my parents that the apartment complex is charging them $4,000 to carpet a 10x10 room, that I have until the end of September to pay it or they will take me to court. My dad is piqued because he knows the damages shouldn't cost that much. He contacts the leasing offices and asks them for a breakdown of the damages. I don't know how, but he managed to get them to tell him. The carpet damage in my room only cost $273. All the other charges were for damages the original tenant and his roommates did. So we contact Bob and he's saying that the other 3 roommates were supporting his claim that my dog had caused all the damages in the house. Firstly, can someone please explain to me how it's my dog's fault that they caused a bottle of wine to explode on the ceiling of the kitchen? Or how she managed to destroy the dishwasher? Or one of the guy's bathtubs? My mom calls her lawyer. My parents, the lawyer, and me have a little powwow. I never signed any document making me an official resident of the apartment. Therefore, I wasn't liable for any damages whatsoever. However, because I'm not a dookie sphincter, I was still willing to pay for the carpet damage. We contact Bob and he refuses the offer of payment. His mom says that she wants me to pay for everything. But no, I'm not going to. Because I'm petty though, I contacted the leasing office. I gave them all the documentation of me living there, which would be the agreement for me to live there, payment history to him, and all of it. And now, the office is not only charging Bob and the other roommates the $4,000, they are suing for a breach of contract because he had an illegal tenant. Should have just taken the $273, dude. Okay, who else just absolutely loves how these stories are structured? The buildup is just so well written. They set up the dominoes and then BAM! $4,000. Beautiful. Good job, guy. This story's called I Just Wanted My Deposit Back. So about 10 years ago, my wife, then girlfriend, and I decided to move in together. She was sick of living in a dorm and my lease was up. And we had a family friend that was looking for someone to move into a little granny flat under their house. I say under because they lived on a steep hill where the flat was below the house with an entrance on the back side. So we had this incredible view out back. A pool, we'll get to that insane thing, fire pits, etc. And the rent was in our price range. And the landlord, let's call her Mary, even dropped it $100 if we did some yard work, skimmed the pool, etc. Oh, my parents own a couple rentals and have my whole life. I've done maintenance for them and even attended a couple of court cases as well with them. This will come into play later. Everything was great for a couple of months. Then Mary and her wife started fighting. Screaming matches, stomping above us, throwing things. I didn't understand how people could be that mad at each other that often and still be together. I eventually sent them an email saying we were not comfortable with the fighting and we wanted to make sure they were okay, etc. They replied with, "You're lucky to have a place this nice." Mary began to scrutinize the yard and pool work I was doing, to the point she would insist I vacuum and skim the saltwater pool with no chemicals. Saltwater pools need far less chlorine than regular ones, but they still need some. She wanted me to stop mowing and use a weed whacker only because the mower was getting old and tired. Just really petty things. The last straw was when a driver was shot in a gang shooting across the street. We decided to cut our losses and get out of there. Found a new apartment and a roommate, one of my wife's college friends, that was open a month later. Perfect for us. We were on month to month on this place. Emailed Mary that we were moving out in 30 days, etc. At that point, she went insane. Tried to do daily inspections of the granny flat, would call and email daily with chores around the property she'd insist we do, and would pound on her floor, our ceiling, every time she heard so much as a whisper. Daily inspections would require 24-hour notice. She never gave that. Then she tried to bring potential renters over to see the flat. With no notice, we flat out told her to go away when that happened. Finally, 2 weeks before move out, she had a pest control guy stop by when I was at work and my wife was in class. Our cat was home alone, and we got the notice about spraying pesticide from her in a text about the same time the guy started. So I rush home after work, stop by upstairs, and ask for a copy of the pest control receipt. I have massive allergies to most pesticides, so I need to know what was used. She goes into her office and brings back a copy with every single chemical on the list checked off. Every single one. I immediately take the copy, run down, grab the cat and a handful of clothes, and drive to my parents' house. We stayed there 4 days, hoping everything would clear out in time for us to finish packing and cleaning. The last couple days before move-out, Mary was out of town, and we were able to get it completely finished a day early. We'd even patched nail holes, painted, cleaned the carpet. My mom came and helped us get it ready for the next tenants. It was immaculate, and we took photos and video of everything. When Mary did check out with us, we said we weren't comfortable being there without filming. Legal to do. And she did a short walkthrough e-fire stating it was fine, but that her copier was broken and she'd have to email us the final copy. 2 days later, we got that copy with $1,400 in damages, claimed above our deposit, including a number of charges like, "My wife had to replace a screw in a cabinet, $1 for screw, $15 for labor." I was livid. The place was spotless. My mother, a landlord who does all her own prep work and rentals, helped us, and we'd been very non-confrontational except for filming the walkthrough. I had kept every email, text, and letter from them, and started to put together a small claims case. I figured she would already be doing the same. Luckily, I knew my tenant's rights and that she'd violated them a lot, including email chains where I'd point out 24-hour notice laws, etc., in emails and she'd reply to them. Finally, I called the exterminator. The conversation went like this. "Hi, you sprayed in my flat without my permission because my landlord ordered it with no notice to me, with my cat inside, and used every chemical on your receipt?" "We most certainly did not. Here's a copy of the work order. We only put out ant traps on the outside." "Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for your clarification." Armed with that last little piece, I countersued, asking for a bad faith penalty as well as our deposit. Bad faith was 3 times deposit, so I was asking for a total of 4 times what we'd given Mary on move-in. The big day came in court. I showed up early, had everything in order and ready, and she swaggers in, huffed up and clearly ready to put me in my place. We sit outside the courtroom for 20 minutes until a courtroom worker asked the waiting room if anyone would be willing to go to mediation instead since they were booked solid. We both say yes and go into a mediation room with an arbitrator whose job was just to keep us civil and answer any legal questions they could while staying neutral. Mary lays out her case. It takes about 4 minutes. The arbitrator looked very neutral still. Then I present my case, bringing up each violation, each lie, and end it with the work order from the exterminator, both copies. At this point, the arbitrator looks visibly upset, and I can tell they're just trying to stay neutral. Mary then asks them, "Why is he asking for 4 times the deposit?" The arbitrator then explains the bad faith penalty, then looks at me. "Would you be okay dropping the penalty for your deposit back?" "Sure." They look over at Mary. I can't tell you what to do, but what I can say is, if you decide to go back into that courtroom in front of a judge, it's not likely to go in your favor. I swear they really said this. I know they're not supposed to, but they did. I got my deposit back. My man, you're not supposed to drop the bad faith penalty. You're supposed to hit them hard with everything you have. How else are they gonna learn? Okay, but in all seriousness, Mary, you're a jerk, but I don't know, relationship issues can cause issues to leak elsewhere in your life, but still, you're stupid. This story's called Animal Mistreating Hag Gets Drop-Kicked from the Neighborhood. 1 year ago, I was renting a house next to the most unpleasant neighbor I hope to ever experience. The only thing I liked about her was her cat. This freakishly adorable tabby who could grab even the most hardened criminal's heart by the garbanzos. Every time I came home from work, he would sidle up next to me for some tender love and care, which he never got from my neighbor. As far as I could tell, she just used the poor thing to keep away mice and play, i.e. be terrorized by her toddler grandkids on the weekends. The poor fur baby looked severely underfed and always appreciated the meals I'd leave out for him on our back porch. Now I have an indoor fur baby of my own, a tailless ball of energy aptly named Goblin, and one day he managed to escape outside. Luckily, I found him within a few hours, but by the next morning, what jumps on my lap? Not Goblin, alas, but a flea. And if my social butterfly cat had fleas, I was positive the next door fur baby had fleas too. Now, I already had a bitter history with this neighbor. In addition to being a twat rocket to her cat, she'd harassed my older parents who were helping me move in. Why? Because our U-Haul rental was blocking a sidewalk to nowhere in front of my house for all of 10 minutes. My parents are extremely pleasant people. My mom frequently gets thanked on customer service hotlines for being the rare kind soul in an ocean of impatient Karens. And this lady was berating them needlessly for ruining the community, ranting even longer than they'd been parked, until they eventually moved to an inconvenient and wholly unnecessary distance. Regardless of her twat rocket personality, I figure I'd warn her anyway in the best interest of her fur baby. When I knew she was at home the next day, I knocked on her front door. When she answered, no hello, just a scowl, I started to explain that my escaped indoor cat has fleas, so there was a good possibility that her outdoor cat also had fleas. Immediately, she berates me for letting my cat get fleas and snaps that she keeps her house very clean, unlike me. So there is no way her cat has fleas. I just loudly sighed at her and went back home as she continued to yell. You've never been in my house, lady, and that's not how fleas work. All week, I noticed her cat scratching himself raw and felt so bad for the little guy. I wanted to give him flea medication in a flea bath, but with my neighbor now watching me like a hawk and screeching like a banshee if I even pet him anymore, I had to leave him alone. But I realized there was something I could do. You see, we shared the same landlord, who was very concerned about household pests and instructed us to call him at the very first sight of a bedbug, tick, etc. I also knew that my neighbor was keeping her cat a secret from the landlord to avoid paying the pet rent, as I'd overheard her bragging about this to a friend outside one day. So what do? I call up the landlord to explain the flea situation, and I make sure to add that my neighbor's cat has also been scratching like crazy. There's a pause. Did you say she has a cat? Yes, I assure him. She definitely has an indoor-outdoor cat. Turns out that my neighbor had harassed our landlord into replacing most of her carpet due to her alleged cat allergy. I don't know why the landlord caved into this, but it wasn't cheap. And now our landlord learned that not only had Mad Woman lied about an allergy to score a free renovation, but she hadn't paid pet rent in more than a year. Well, an exterminator gets called and our landlord himself shows up to oversee the whole thing. We had both received a flyer taped to our front doors giving notice that he would be coming to our houses on that date. But I may or may not have removed my neighbors so she wouldn't be able to just hide evidence of her cat for a few hours. So our landlord arrives, and I listen gleefully with my window open as my neighbor tries to prevent him and the exterminator from entering. Eventually, she allows them to come inside, where there is obvious evidence of a pet living there. I don't know exactly what transpired between her and the landlord. There must have been other crap stains on her record, being such a nutcase. But a few months later, I had a new next-door neighbor. And guess who Mad Woman purposefully abandoned during the move? Her poor fur baby, who became a much-loved and flea-free member of our house. Wow, this is like the most wholesome case of ProRevenge I've ever seen. Our Redditor here did that, all of this just for that cat, and I find that very wholesome and sweet, and I loved reading that. This story's called Landlord Made Me Live in Squalor, Now She's Bankrupt. So here's the story of my previous living situation, which was, at best, horrendous. I moved into what I thought at the time, was a lovely 3 and 4 bedroom house with a nice offset garage and a garden. Perfect for my family consisting of myself, my partner, and my 3 kids. Well, a few weeks into moving in, the problems started to arise. We moved in just before Christmas and the weather was awful. Torrential rain, in fact, which is when we discovered the horrendous leak in my roof. And I mean water streaming through the roof, into the walls and down my windows, resulting in all my pots and pans having to sit in my window to collect said rain. We then ended up realizing we had a leak through the roof in my daughter's room after she was awoken by rain dripping on her while she slept. She was 2 at the time. We discovered over the course of the time we lived there that the electrics had never been checked and often shorted out. The gas pipes were under regulated minimum gauge, and when the heating was on, we couldn't power the gas cooker or vice versa. The decking out the back was rotten, and when we stood on it, it just snapped. There was a 4-foot drop underneath us. A gas safety check showed that the combination boiler was broken and condemned, but they still refused to replace it. The heating system could never be switched off, even in the summer. All of these were reported and promised to be fixed. Over time, the patio door hinge, which was snapped, completely fell off and we couldn't close it properly or lock it. Reported and we were told it would be fixed. Waited months, and even though I was still paying full rent, it never got fixed. I eventually got fed up and reported it to the local environmental health team. They came out to inspect the property and raised concerns over the kitchen floor, which was warped and a major trip hazard. We also discovered from this visit that the 4th bedroom, which was in the loft, was illegal due to how it had been done. No insulation, no heating, botched electrics. So the local environmental health team handed an order over to the landlord to repair all these in a 3-month period. It didn't get done. The council took the landlord to court for breach, and she ended up having to pay fines and was given another 6 weeks to rectify. A few of the jobs got sorted when I found my new house to move into. 2 years later, I've just found out through a close friend the council proceeded to complete the jobs themselves, and the landlord has now been declared bankrupt due to this. Her house is being put up for auction, she will receive nowhere near what she needs to pay off her debts, and has had to give up her other houses due to bankruptcy laws, meaning she can't own equity, not even a decent car. If only she'd put the rent I was paying into fixing her house, it wouldn't have gone this far. I'm not sure what happened regarding the illegal goings-on, the gas and electrical problems that were never properly upkept, but I like to hope she got punished in some way or form. I'd say that the landlord was sufficiently punished, given that her life is completely over now. Yikes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.